Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
Oh, by the way, Adam Beck just missed another strike call. Oh, darn. So
that's a tough way to start the morning.
That is a tough way to start the morning. Man, I think Pat Murphy's still barking in his sleep right now. That was so, that guy, easiest lip reader in the world, I think, is Pat Murphy.
Right.
And I don't know, I was watching a little bit towards the end, and I think it was BA that said, kids don't watch the TV right now.
Don't read lips, yeah.
But let me ask you, Brandon, because I used it as a poll question last night. Based off that game last night, are you in favor of the challenge system coming next year?
I am in the way, as long as it's just the challenge system.
Yeah.
I don't want to just see home plate umpires completely removed.
Right.
Because, still for the most part, they do get it right.
Yeah.
And I think yesterday's case is kind of the extreme example of, that zone's changed inning to inning.
Right.
And I think that's always the biggest thing you hear from people when it comes to complaints about a home plate umpire is inconsistency.
Right.
Early on it was really big, then it got small, then it kind of got big at times. There's just, inning to inning, pitch to pitch, there just was no consistency with it.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that is going to always irk, not just fans, but especially players, because they just don't know what to expect.
Right.
A ball that's a ball and a half off the outside of the corner could be called a strike in the fifth inning, and a ball that hits the edge in the sixth might not be.
Especially if I would imagine the catcher who's back there the whole time,
right?
And, different pitchers coming in,
yeah.
And they're trying to call it and frame it and such.
And it's funny, kind of going back to Tuesday, the first game of the series, kind of seeing the layout of the umps and seeing that C.B. Buckner was at third base that game, oh, wow, C.B. Buckner's not going to be behind the plate for this series. That's a big break for both teams.
Yeah.
Because he's been known to struggle at times over the years, and little did I know that C.B. Buckner would not be the umpiring cause of issue in that series.
Right. I feel like if you know a ref or an ump's name, it tends to not be for very good reasons.
Right. Especially in baseball.
Yeah.
Obviously we know the ones that were kind of synonymous, but there are some really, really good ones that they're just going to go out and they do their job, and you just, again, you don't hear about them.
Yeah, can anybody name an ump, and it's for good reason, not saying everybody's perfect, but, there's probably reasons why that
right. Maybe in football, just because football is more popular.
Yep.
You might be a little bit more likely to, and obviously people.
That's why Gene Steratore is the greatest official of all time.
Well,
because he does basketball one day and then football the next.
Right, right.
Or he, it has been determined that the receiver did not maintain the.
He had a flair. He always had a flair for the dramatic.
Or was it the note card that he was he the one that busted out the note card?
I think it was.
Or it's Hockey and Muscles, and
that's why I was going to say with hockey, that's why people knew him.
Right.
I think he was all right as an ump, but
he did have the goof. Was it the Broncos game that one year? I can't remember exactly what it was, but was it an interception or fault? But it was but he admitted it afterwards too.
Right.
That was a big goof on him too.
Right.
So Jeff Triplett wasn't the greatest one either.
No,
but he had a very unique way of calling penalties and such too. So, but you look back at this series, it's just a split, I guess. I know Pat Murphy said yesterday too that they would have preferred to play 2 instead of 5 games in 4 days in August. And again, I love the tongue-in-cheek comment. He's like, but I guess it's supposed to rain later, or maybe the drinking ordinance expire. I'm like, oh, this is giving me shades of the sun delay from a few years ago.
Was it 2017 or 2018? I forget which year it was. But
yeah. But so there's a little bit of back and forth there too, and I'm sure he was probably still reeling from the
game itself,
the emotions,
just kind of a couple things snowballing, and it's been kind of crazy though. Had they come, assuming that game that goes the exact same way it did, seeing those teams come back to try to play a game again that night.
Yeah,
the Brewers, because obviously that was just a very emotional win for them. Just one where they expended a lot of energy, probably more than they were thinking they might need to a couple innings earlier.
Right.
But, yeah.
But when you look at, the series overall, too, Isaac Collins, maybe it was the Isaac Collins series. A home run in each. He had the great defensive catch in the first game of this, too. And I know Garrett Mitchell's now in AAA for his rehab, but, you look at what Collins has maybe done lately, and I know he could play a little second base here too. Is he working his way that he should maybe try to stay under as a reserve player, as a utility player?
Yeah, I think he's someone that's earned that, has earned that, especially with the bat, but also you mentioned the defense. I mean, it's going to be kind of interesting to see how that works. And, we had the conversation, I forget if it was last week or, relatively recently, about the possibility of kind of moving people around. And, I was pretty firm in the camp of like, well, you can't really move Bryce Strang off second. But, I mean, when now the things may be kind of aligning the way they are, it's like, well, you really kind of want to keep Isaac Collins in the lineup if you can, because he's been one of your better offensive players, especially recently. So, and he is someone with some second base experience. So it's like, well, do you, try that? It's like, well, I mean, that's something I've kind of come around to a little bit more, even though just kind of making moves like that from one position to another is during the season is tough. But, for a team that needs all the offense they can get, like sometimes you kind of, you kind of got to try things.
Right. And, I know there's going to be some people that will say, well, can he play third? He has very, very sparingly.
Yeah. And I don't think it's gone great from what I remember. So that was more in the minors, obviously. But
to be fair, Durbin lately, too, has been hitting really well.
Yes. I mean, him and Joey Ortiz have been better. It's just that, I mean, when you look at, just example, like look at the Cubs lineup during that series. Like, the Brewers feel like they're a lineup that hopes to score runs. The Cubs are a lineup that expects to score runs.
Right.
Like, you look at that lineup top to bottom. When you got Nico Horner hitting ninth.
Yeah.
Or eighth, sorry. Matt Shaw was hitting ninth. But a rookie with Pop hitting ninth, like, that's just the difference right now.
Because what aren't they? They're like the best in baseball, or right up there with like a runner in scoring position, and they're running across.
They're hitting his runners in scoring position very good, but they're just a complete offense. I mean, they hit for power. They can steal bases. You mentioned hitting for scoring position. Like, they're just top to bottom. And with the Brewers, it's one of those things where like you can kind of handle having someone like Ortiz or Durbin in your lineup if your big guns are producing. And guys like Yelich and True have been better. It's just that they're not. I mean, they're on a 700. They're like on a 900 OPS pace over the last 15 games versus like a Kyle Tucker or Peter Armstrong, who are hitting around there for the season.
Right.
Like, it's just
they're more consistent.
Right. Year. They've been better longer this year so far. Now, if those other guys I mentioned, continue to do that for the Brewers, okay, well then you can kind of sometimes some people can carry a little bit more of the mail than others, but that's just been kind of the struggle for them is. You've had people at the bottom of the lineup that haven't hit, and the people in the heart of your lineup, be it the kind of the thumb injury, which I think is really bugging Contreras, especially when it comes to hitting for power.
Yeah,
and some of the things we've seen from some other people, like it's not firing on all cylinders like it might be for teams like Chicago.
Right,
and
right.
To me, that's the difference right now.
Yeah, I mean, you watch that team, the Cubs, feels like they could be down a few runs, but they're not completely out of that.
Right,
they can make
it up really quick. If the Brewers are in that spot where they're down 8-3, I think people are probably thinking, okay, this one's probably about done. But that Cubs team, like, you just kind of had that feeling, okay, well, they're still going to have to go through some of these guys at least one more time, and we saw what happened.
Right, definitely so. Brewers pick up their 40th win yesterday. Freddie Peralta got the start. They decided to keep him on that consistent plan. Mizorowski's going to get the start today. I want to go back to a combo that we were kind of having earlier in the week, and this goes to a report from John Heyman last weekend that Freddie would like an extension with the Brewers. But it seems like the Brewers haven't been reciprocating that kind of thought, and Freddie will have 1 year left. It's a club option for only $8 million after this year. Do you feel like this is going into the same path as a Corbin Burns, as a Devin Williams, and even a Josh Hader, where would it surprise you at all if next offseason they trade Freddie Peralta because they want to get something in return from him and they got all these youngsters waiting to come up?
It would not. And that's just kind of how they operate, especially seems like with pitching. They're a team, or they're an organization that kind of prides itself in being able to develop pitching, and we've seen they've been able to do that. I mean, we're kind of seeing, obviously with Mizorowski now, but maybe that next wave of guys coming up. Logan Henderson, we've seen Coleman Crow, who's a guy that's turned some heads. He got called up to AAA here recently, so that means he's kind of knocking on the doorstep a little bit. There's some other guys,
Robert Gasser,
maybe later on this year we'll see there, but. Yeah, I mean, at this point, that would not surprise me. That's just kind of how they operate. I mean, honestly, if the Brewers fell off between now and the end of July, I could see them, maybe dealing him in July. And if that's the case, he would be, arguably one of the most sought after players.
Right.
And that's just, sucks. I mean, but it's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Right. And I mean, so I was looking at it and like, okay, so the return they got for Corbin was Joey Ortiz, DL Hall, and a draft pick. Devin Williams was Nestor Cortez and Caleb Durbin. I'd be like, can we get a better bat? In return for Freddie?
Right. But then also remember, you look at it the other way with Willie Adames, where what they got was the comp pick.
Yeah. Yep.
So you kind of balance it where, well, obviously with Adames and what he brought to the table, they thought like, okay, this is just the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of the way they're thinking a little bit more?
Right.
I think a lot of that's going to depend on this next month or so.
Oh, so I was going to ask you, could a lot depend on even just how the year finishes too?
Right.
I think
because I think after 2022, if they're in contention and be it for the division or a wild card spot, which I believe they're in one right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're half game out.
For whatever that's worth right now. But still, like, they're right there. Like, it could be something to say, well, look, after 2022, we can't try to kind of adjust on the fly, because Freddie Peralta is another one of those guys that, obviously he's in the middle of a lot of what they do. He's a leader on the team. Mm-hmm. They found out what happens when you do that sometimes with certain players.
Right.
You try to kind of adjust on the fly, and if you do it with the wrong people, the locker room's not going to take it very well.
Because that's a guy that's been a pillar there for a long time right now.
I mean, he's he's got to be one of their. Is he their longest tenured Brewer?
Got to imagine. Currently, at least.
Yeah,
right?
currently.
Yeah,
I mean, he made his debut in 2017.
Yeah, and Yelich was 18 when he came on.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
he's up there.
I'm trying to think offhand of anyone that's been there, on the team longer, but I don't think so. I think he's probably their longest tenured player.
Yeah. Actually made his debut 18.
Oh,
May
it was
13.
18. Okay,
Yep.
Okay. It was May. I forgot it was May of 7.
So him and Yelich are.
Yeah, okay. So I forgot
right
if it was May, 17 or 18. So okay, so him. Yeah, so then him and Yelich would be the two. So.
Speaking of starting pitching, I wanted to. So we're talking about starters and futures, and I was listening a little bit to BA yesterday when Aaron Ashby was in the game, and they kind of talked about, is he still a starter in the future? Do they still view him as a starter in the future? And a lot of it is based off because of the stuff that he kind of throws and the power and such. And we know he's locked up too. He signed that Freddie Peralta-esque extension. Then he got hurt.
Right.
After that. Do you feel like he is still a guy that could be because I got to imagine he still wants to be a starter.
Yeah.
But do you think that the Brewers still view him, or should view him, maybe is the better way to ask that, as a starter?
I don't know. I think with him and DL Hall, I've gotten to the point where, like, we've seen what they can do as kind of these multi-inning relievers, and I'm kind of like, I'm a big believer in just kind of letting someone do, kind of put their best foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
If this is what you do and you can do it really well, then just do that. Like, and especially knowing that the Brewers have a lot of potential options for starters.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly think that, we've kind of seen a bit of a change since those guys have been able to do that. I mean, the bullpen doesn't seem like it's worked as much, with certain guys. And then part of that's just how, games obviously develop, and maybe they've had a few more blowout wins in there versus earlier in the year. But I don't know. I just like having the opportunity to have those two guys that can go out there and give you 2, maybe 3 innings on a good day. Like, I just think that there's a lot of options with what you can do everywhere else. And look, as long as they're kind of still churning out some of these starters, and Quinn Priester keeps pitching well, and Mizorowski has some staying power in the rotation, like, it's a luxury to have, and it's not necessarily something you have to go to. And with Aaron Ashby, you mentioned the contract, like, I think for him there's kind of some peace of mind where he's not maybe having the same conversations that Josh Hader had to have. Like, and when Josh Hader was going through arbitration, the reason he was kind of felt the way he did about things is because the arbitration process is very flawed. They look at certain things. They were looking at saves and stuff like that, and he knew, like, hey, if I want to get paid what I deserve, like, I kind of need to just be doing this. Versus Aaron Ashby's money is already guaranteed. Like,
right.
He already knows what he's getting, regardless of if he's throwing 150 innings or 75 innings on the bullpen.
Right.
So, he may want to start, but it's kind of one of those things where, like, if you're doing this at a really high level, and obviously yesterday wasn't a great day for him, but overall his results since he's got back have been really good.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of got to look at it and say, well, but this is what you're kind of doing really, really well. This is how you're helping the team the best right now, and we're kind of set up pretty well in the rotation.
Right. So that's that. I was listening to that conversation, and I'm like, God, do they really view him as with all that young talent that they got? And I get it, he's got starter stuff,
right?
But
he's got multiple pitches in there, but like you kind of look at it now, you can kind of pare it down to he's got the sinker that's upper 90s and the big loopy curveball. Which, I mean, even yesterday when it wasn't his best day, still had Pete Crow Armstrong and then Kyle Tucker kind of or somebody else, but like they had kind of the jello legs a little bit on a couple of those. Like sometimes you can just kind of pare things down and become a 2 or 3 pitch pitcher out of the bullpen, and that works out the best for you.
Right. Let's talk about this Brewers series going up against the Twins. So we got an interesting matchup tonight with Mizorowski and Ryan. Joe Ryan on the mound. Joe Ryan, who's 7-2 with a sub-3 ERA. So you got that one. You got Quintana going tomorrow, and then Quinn Priester going on Sunday. For me, maybe I'm over-exaggerating a little bit, but with Mizorowski, I'm curious. Obviously, it's just his second start. How much is the ankle going to affect him tonight? The heat, too. I mean, if he was cramping, in his first start, what are you kind of looking for Mizorowski in his second career start? Obviously, we would love to see another no-hitter going through it and such, but, I mean, is there something from that game one that maybe you'd like to see a little bit better? I know his walks were a little bit up there and such, but what are you looking for from Mizorowski tonight?
I think it's going to be the same thing we're looking from him pretty much in all his starts early on, is just being consistent around the strike zone. Like being able to, if you get ahead, like throwing competitive pitches even when you're ahead, just because the strike zone can kind of come and go for him. It's been better this year, but I think that's still something that's a consistent work in progress for him. Just being able to throw quality strikes,
right?
Like, and being able to do it with a couple different ways, with a couple different pitches. The slider was a big pitch for him in that first start, but being able to mix in some change-ups against the lefties and a curveball here or there, just enough to try to keep people off that fastball, which is very, very fast, obviously. But in the majors, if you kind of know it's coming, chances are big league hitters are still going to be able to get a pretty good swing on it most times.
Right, exactly. So, and then offensively going up against Ryan, which was it the 16th? Yeah, when he went up against the Brewers and he had a really good game.
He had a really good game the first time out. He's had a really good year just in general. Just obviously just trying to carry over, what they were able to do yesterday against Jameson Taillon.
Right. Do you think that's an advantage for the Brewers because those guys saw him earlier? Is it advantage for Twins because, well, I mean, they already know they had success, but then that was also during the stretch. I don't want to downplay it, but where the Twins were just hot. Like, they won 13, 14 games in a row. Yeah. They were just clicking on all cylinders.
I think it's helpful to kind of see it before, but especially because in interleague play, that doesn't really happen a lot.
Right.
Where you see the same starter twice. But, yeah, I think they're just going to have to, hopefully carry over the good things and just kind of take advantage of opportunities when they come. And, with Joe Ryan, there might not be very many just because of, how well he's been pitching. But you got, when you got to do it when you can. And if you get on base, you got to, try to get the running game going, which is something that's obviously a big part of what the Brewers do.
And, I mean, the Twins have kind of been an interesting team this year where they got off to that really slow start. Then they were just hot in May. And now they're 3-7 in their last 10. They're just sitting at 500 right now. But you look at where both of these teams are in terms of a playoff chase. The Brewers are a half game out. Twins are just a game out of a playoff chase. I mean, we're right around the halfway mark of the season. Is it dumb to say that this is a big series for both these teams just because of how things are shaping up right now in this chase?
No, it is. It's a big series for both teams. I mean, you want to, you don't want to do anything to take yourself kind of out of that playoff conversation. Really, the only way that happens is if you get swept.
Yeah.
That's kind of and that's going to be the thing too with the Brewers looking up at the Cubs is you can't get swept in these in series. If you lose 2 or 3, obviously not ideal, but that's a little bit different compared to you lost all 3 of your games.
Right. I also look at this too, like take advantage of a Twins team that may be struggling a little bit. And I know they put up 12 runs last night against the Reds, but overall, I mean, as we mentioned, 3-7 in their last 10. But for the Brewers too, I look at what's coming up after that. You take 2 out of 3 against this Twins team. I think it sets up nicely from their pitching standpoint with Quintana and then Priester after Mizorowski. You got Pittsburgh and Colorado coming to your home. You better win those. Those are the two worst teams in the National League from win percentage standpoint.
Right.
So I'd look at this like, make it even a little bit sweeter by taking 2 out of 3 in a row against the Twins.
Right.
And this has been really a month of June. Brewers haven't traveled a lot. I mean, they had a long stretch at home, and even their road series, I mean, Cincinnati and then Chicago and Minnesota. You're not traveling a ton this month. And you look at they've swept Philly. They took 2 out of 3 against Cincy. They lost to the Padres and the Braves. Took 3 out of 4 against the Cardinals. Split against the Cubbies here. How would you assess how this big month of June is going so far for the Brewers?
So far, I mean, just in general, I would say pretty well. I think if you go back to, there's a certain stat I forget yesterday on the broadcast, which basically said that since, I don't know if it was middle of June or, it was might have been just some arbitrary endpoint in May, but the Brewers have been one of the better teams in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was like the Tigers, the Rays, and then the Brewers and the Cubs both had 18 wins in their last 27 games or something like that.
Which kind of surprising.
A little bit. But so it's gone pretty well. I know those series losses to the Padres and the Braves were a little frustrating.
Yeah.
But you just have to continue it. You have to you have to allow it to snowball.
Right.
Normally, when we talk about stuff, you say you don't want it to snowball. I think in this case, you kind of want it to.
Mm-hmm. Right. Looking at how this team is, where they're at, they're 5 games above 500. You mentioned the run that they're on and such. Yet, I think it's you throw in the Tigers, you throw in the Cubs, 2 of the better teams in all of Major League Baseball, and you throw the Brewers in that conversation too. Does that just make it more impressive for how they're winning these games? I mean, you look at the offensive side of things. Yes, I think starting pitching is still getting a little underrated because they've been fantastic. I mean, that was a story to begin the year with all the injuries, and starting pitching has been awesome. But the fact that their offense has been so kind of up and down and maybe a little bit more down in recent stretches, who do you give a lot of that credit to? Is it Pat Murphy? Is it the front office? Is it the player? I mean, the fact that are you surprised that they're in this position considering how their offense has been the biggest part of the season?
A little bit. I mean, starting pitching to start the day is 5th in the majors in ERA.
Yeah.
There's a couple stats within there that haven't been great. They've had some walk issues, some stuff like that. But, really, you look at the offense and, they're 13th in runs scored, but they're, 24th in OPS. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that they're 2nd in stolen bases.
Right.
So, they've been able to kind of, take a little bit from that. But no, I would agree. I mean, the relievers, there's been some blow-ups in there.
Yep.
But, for the most part, I think, the guys at the top, be it, Trevor McGill or Abner Uribe or whoever, like, they've been pretty good. I mean, obviously yesterday was a tough, kind of tough for Uribe for a couple different reasons, but still, there really wasn't anything hit hard off him. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of one of those death by 1,000 paper cut innings that he was able to kind of get out of with the lead still.
Right.
So, I mean, they're kind of winning in ways we've seen them win in recent years, but but the difference is, I think, in the last couple of years they've done it. They've been able to be in first in part because just there wasn't that other team in the Central that was really that prime challenger. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this year there is with the Cubs. So
yeah,
the bar has to be raised a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And you even look at, I mean, kind of surprised me when I was looking at the standings and be like, oh, the Cardinals are back up there, and the Reds are right there too. Yeah. So I mean, you're getting pushed you're chasing one team, but you're also getting pushed by a couple more teams at this point too. So I mean, you look at the NL Central, it's almost like well, what division was I going to say in football? Where you got 3-4 really good teams and just one bottom feeder at this point. One really good player on the Pirates.
There is,
but it's maybe one of the more underrated divisions in terms of competitiveness. Would you say in Major League Baseball?
Probably. I think coming into the year, it was kind of expected that whoever won the division, there wouldn't be a wild card team from the Central, and that could still very well be the case. But the fact that there's still teams in that hunt,
mm-hmm.
I think says that maybe the division was a little bit better than people thought, but there's still plenty of room for maneuvering to change.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, if you look at where things are currently in the standings, I mean, we know the division leaders. Although the NL East is getting a little bit more interesting between the Mets and the and the Phillies.
Yeah, I believe the Mets got swept, didn't they? I think by the Braves.
Yeah. So right now, you look at it in terms of just the National League standings here. You got the Cubs have a slightly better win percentage over the Dodgers right now, so they'd be the top team. Then it's the Dodgers, Mets and Phillies, both 45 and 30. Giants, then obviously the loser of that one would be the top wild card team. Then you got the Giants and then the Padres. Brewers, Cardinals, just a half game out from a wild card spot. The Reds are 1.5 out. The Diamondbacks are back to just being 3 out, and then I wouldn't shut the door on the Braves. You know, they're 5.5 back. I mean, they still got a lot of talent on that team. So, and then I mean, the AL is kind of similar too, Brain. I mean, Tampa. You got Detroit, the Yankees, and Houston as your division leaders. Tampa Bay, never sleep on the Rays, I guess, for crying out loud. They're the top wildcard team. Toronto, Boston. I mean, that's all AL East. Cleveland's just a half game out. Seattle's just a half game out. Minnesota's just a game out. The Royals are 1.5 out. For crying out loud, the Angels are just 2 out. And the Rangers 2.5. So I know it's still early, but you start to factor in trade deadline coming up with so many teams in contention. Prices are going to go up for players.
It's a seller's market.
Yeah.
You know, if you're one of those teams that, you know, the Pirates or whoever, the Rockies, if you got an asset, a player that somebody wants, like, chances are you're going to have many teams, you know, vying for those players.
I want to ask you about one of those players too, and he's from the Rockies, the third baseman from the Rockies. Obviously,
Ryan McMahon.
Yeah, we're going to be. If you ask Brewers fans, it's third base, left side of the infield for power. I mean, Yankees might be looking for a third baseman. Twins are dealing with an injury at third base and such. Would he be a fit in Milwaukee? Do you think? I mean, he's a veteran. He's 30,
fit.
right?
He'd fit, but I just don't know. I don't know. Ryan McMahon's one of those guys that, like, he doesn't have a super high ceiling. Mm-hmm. Like, you look at his numbers over the years, and on surface they kind of look good, but then you remember he's playing half his game in Coors Field. So
yeah,
but he's a really good defender over there, which we know the Brewers like to prioritize good defenders. So like, I mean, I could see it, but at the same time, like, I don't know if the Brewers would be motivated to go over the top for it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Versus another team that might be able to.
Yeah. Do you feel like, you know, because once we get close to the trade deadline, I feel like there's a narrative that kind of gets thrown out there that the Brewers don't make moves before the deadline, that they don't make moves to help out their teams. And maybe some years they haven't. But, you know, they did, you could say whether these moves worked or not, but they did bring in Moustakas. They did bring in Jonathan Scope. You know, they've done those type of moves. Do you think that's an unfair narrative surrounding the Brewers that, well, they won't do any moves anyways before the deadline because they never do?
No, I think they'll do moves, but it's not always necessarily going to be kind of the big name move you've heard of. Mm-hmm. You know, they're not going to always go, you know, shopping at, I'm trying to think of what the high end store would be.
Right.
But sometimes you find a really good deal somewhere else.
It's not going to be a CC every year.
No, you can't.
No.
Like,
right.
I mean, the Brewers can't, but and the Brewers won't.
Right.
But like, I think they've been willing to kind of show they'll kind of strike when the iron's hot, depending on. I mean, you know, but right. I just don't. I mean, they're not. I'm trying to think of who would be like the top guy that might be available. Like, I don't think they're going to make a move for whoever that would be.
You know, I know a few weeks ago, and this has probably changed because they're in a playoff chase right now. But you know, there was the Bo Bichette talk. Like,
right.
What could he be? And I'm like, I don't know if the Brewers would pay that much to
right.
get
I mean,
Bo Bichette.
He was a guy that really struggled last year, but he's bounced back in a big way this year. So, but yeah, you're right. Like, I think they would do something. I just don't think it would be, and I think that it would be someone people, you know, they know off the top of their head. And I think that's kind of a trap people fall into sometimes. It's like, well, if I've heard of this guy, he has to be good. It's like, well, not always.
Right.
Like, or I haven't heard of this guy, he must suck. Well, I mean, probably didn't hear of Drew Pomeranz in 2019. He was arguably their best reliever down the stretch.
Right.
You know, you probably didn't hear of.
Well, I mean, could we use the example of Quinn Priester this year? Like, because it was like, yeah, man, they gave up too much for this guy, but he's actually been doing pretty
really well,
right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's where you got to trust the scouts in the front. That's their job.
Prior to the deadline last year, it was, you know, who's Nick Mears?
Yeah.
And Nick Mears is obviously, you know, he even last year he still kind of had to work through the home run bug, but this year, I mean, he's been one of their top relievers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So